All right, so get this. My buddy's been trying to buy a house for what feels like forever, and every time he thinks he's found the one, bam, someone swoops in with a higher offer. It's like the Wild West out there in the housing market.
Oh, tell me about it. The market's been on a roller coaster ride, that's for sure. And lately, there's been all this talk about how boomers are going to downsize, free up all this inventory, and maybe, just maybe, give buyers like your friend a fighting chance.
Right, like a tidal wave of houses hitting the market, prices finally cooling down, everyone wins.
Exactly. It seemed like a pretty safe bet, too, right? Kids are grown, they've flown the coop. Time to cash in on those sweet, sweet home values.
Exactly. But then we got our hands on these articles we're diving into today, and let me tell you, the reality is, well, it's a little more complicated.
To say the least. It's kind of a fascinating twist, actually. For a while there, everyone and their dog was convinced that we were on the verge of this massive boomer exodus from the housing market.
Yeah, and honestly, it made sense. I mean, you hit a certain age, maybe downsizing to something a little more manageable, a little less upkeep, just makes sense.
Right, exactly. Less space to clean, lower property taxes, maybe pocket some extra cash. It all seemed pretty logical. But it turns out those assumptions, well, they didn't tell the whole story.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Like that, this one of the articles we dug into, it dropped this bombshell statistic. A whopping 54% of baby boomer homeowners, they have zero plans to sell. Like ever.
Yeah, 54%. Can you believe that? And here's the kicker. We're not just talking about a small segment of the population here. You know, boomers, they might only make up about 21% of the U.S. population. But get this, they own a staggering 38% of the homes.
Whoa, that is a serious chunk of the market, just like chilling out, staying put.
Totally. So, naturally, this begs the question, why? Why are boomers so attached to their homes, even with all the potential benefits of downsizing? Is it just about the money, or is there something deeper at play here?
Right, because if it was just about the money, you'd think more of them would be jumping at that chance to cash in.
Exactly. But it seems like there's a lot more to it than that. And one of the articles we dug into, it really dives into the emotional side of homeownership, especially for boomers.
Yeah, like this one homeowner they quoted. They said, and I'm paraphrasing here, this house is more than just a building to me. It's where I raised my kids. It's where we had all our big family gatherings. It's where we built our lives. Like, you could just hear the sentiment in their voice.
Totally. And that sentiment, it's incredibly powerful. It's about more than just square footage and property lines, you know? It's about legacy. It's about memories. It's about a sense of belonging that goes way beyond just the financial aspect.
Yeah, it really makes you think if so many boomers are holding onto their homes, not just as investments, but as like these treasured keepsakes almost, what does that even mean for the rest of the housing market? You know, especially for those of us who aren't sitting on a mountain of equity already.
Well, yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, we're already dealing with crazy low inventory prices that feel like they're on another planet, and then you add this whole boomer holdout into the mix. It's like, are we ever going to catch a break?
It's like trying to find a parking spot in a city where nobody ever moves their car.
That's a great analogy, actually, because it really highlights the core issue here, which is supply and demand. When you have a limited supply of something, in this case, homes for sale, and the demand remains high, well, guess what happens to the price?
It's economics 101, right? Less supply plus high demand equals.
You got it, higher prices. And unfortunately, that means that for first-time buyers, those already trying to climb that property ladder, it's just going to get even tougher.
All right, so not exactly what folks looking to buy were hoping to hear. And then, just to add another layer of complexity to this whole equation, we've got those always fun, always predictable, pause, mortgage rates to contend with.
Don't even get me started on mortgage rates. One minute they're creeping up, the next they're teasing a dip. It's enough to give anyone whiplash.
Seriously. And of course, everyone's looking to the Fed like they hold all the answers, just waiting to see what their next move is going to be.
It's true. The Fed definitely has a way of keeping us all on our toes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll admit, even I, with my fancy finance background, sometimes I feel like I need a translator just to understand what they're actually saying half the time.
Right. It's like a whole other language.
It really is. But hey, at least we can usually count on them to keep things interesting, right? But in all seriousness, the key thing for folks to remember here is that while the Fed doesn't directly control mortgage rates, what they do definitely has a ripple effect throughout the entire market.
It's like that butterfly effect thing, right?
Exactly. And right now, the big question on everyone's mind is whether or not the Fed will decide to lower rates again. Because theoretically, if rates go down, it could potentially make borrowing a bit easier, a bit less expensive, which could provide some relief for buyers.
Okay, so lower rates, that sounds pretty good on paper, right? I mean, smaller monthly payments, a little more breathing room in the budget. Who wouldn't want that? But this other article we came across, it kind of threw some cold water on that whole idea of getting too excited just yet.
Yeah. Yeah, and for a very valid reason. Because here's the thing. Even if the Fed does decide to lower rates, it's unlikely to be this huge, dramatic shift that suddenly makes everything completely affordable. And on top of that, those lower rates, they could actually end up attracting even more buyers to the market, all hoping to snag a deal, which could then lead to, you guessed it, even more competition.
So it's like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Pretty much. It's a tough call, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer, unfortunately.
Okay, so for anyone listening who's like knee-deep in this housing hunt right now, their head's probably spinning. What's the game plan then? How do you even begin to weigh those options?
Well, you know, the funny thing is, one of the experts we came across, they actually gave some surprisingly practical advice. They basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but don't get so caught up in trying to time the market perfectly or waiting for some magical drop in rates that you miss out on what's right in front of you.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
So how do you actually put that into practice, though? Like, how do you know if holding out for those maybe lower rates is worth the risk of potentially losing out on a house you love?
It all comes down to your personal circumstances and priorities, really. Like, let's say you found a place that ticks all your boxes, you're comfortable with the numbers, you know, the monthly payments work with your budget, and you can see yourself planting roots there long term. In that scenario, buying now, even if rates do dip a little in the future, it might not be a bad move at all.
Because you're starting to build equity right away, you've locked in your housing costs, and maybe most importantly, you've sidestepped that whole uncertainty factor of just waiting around to see what the market's going to do next.
Exactly. But I can already hear what some folks are thinking, like, but what if I buy now and then next month, bam, rates take a nosedive?
Oh, yeah. Major buyer's remorse territory.
Yeah, totally. But here's the thing to remember. If rates do happen to drop significantly down the line, you can always look into refinancing your mortgage.
Oh, right. Refinancing. It's like a little safety net in case you miss out on a slightly better deal later on.
Exactly. Gives you some options, you know, peace of mind. But the flip side is true too, right? If you wait and rates go up instead of down, well, you might have missed that window of opportunity. It's a balancing act no matter how you slice it.
This is why we do these deep dives, though, right?
Sorry.
Break down these complicated, sometimes kind of scary topics and make them feel a little more manageable.
100%. It's all about empowering ourselves with information, right? The more we know, the better equipped we are to make smart decisions for our own lives.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into this whole boomer housing holdout, what's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with today? What should they be thinking about as they go about their day?
You know, we've covered a lot of ground here, the potential for things to get even more competitive for buyers, the impact on prices. But what I find really fascinating is the bigger picture. If this trend of boomers staying put continues, how will it reshape not just the housing market, but like our communities as a whole?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. Like, will we see a surge in multi-generational living? Will there be a greater emphasis on creating neighborhoods that are designed for aging in place? These are big questions.
Definitely a lot to think about. I think you just gave our listeners plenty to ponder.
I certainly hope so. These are conversations that we need to be having.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thanks for joining us for another deep dive, everyone. Until next time.